Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Well, that happened, Leafs fans, Sens fans. I expect you're feeling pretty good. Welcome back to Game Over. Welcome to a Game Over crossover. I'm Dominic from Game Over Toronto. With me is Charlie from Game Over Ottawa. We're going to have some fun breaking down this last game. Well, Charlie, I think you're going to have fun. I'm just going to, if I had any hair left, I'd be pulling it out after that one. That was an interesting matchup. The Sens looking good as they inch ever closer to securing that playoff spot, and the Leafs not looking so great as we watch first place in the division disappear off into the distance. Especially since the Habs of all teams did us a favor tonight against the Panthers. We couldn't beat them, but the Habs have got them. So, oh yeah, good times, Leafs fan, good times. We'll get into the game. We'll break everything down. We'll have some Leafs Sens discussion here on this Game Over crossover Battle of Ontario edition. Charlie, I'm going to throw things right over to you first. Tell me what you thought of this game overall.
I thought, I think in a very Sens fashion, it felt very one-sided for the first, I'd say, 40 minutes. Things kind of fell apart for Ottawa after that. Sens with, I think the deserved win here tonight. I think they were the better team overall. It wasn't quite as lopsided as I thought it might be by the end of the game. That third period, things kind of got a little bit scary for the Sens. And also on the note of the Montreal Canadiens, very funny that, Sens fans have a very different opinion on that game with the result there with Sens fans we're not really looking at Florida all that much right now. Although Sens are 4 points back of both Toronto and Tampa now. So yeah, maybe I should be paying attention to that. Maybe I should. I'm only looking at the wild card race right now, so I should be focusing on that a little bit more. You're
moving. They're moving into that position where, maybe it's not the most likely scenario, but it's
right.
Looking more and more possible every day that you could overtake either the Leafs or the Lightning. And let's be honest, it's the way things are looking right now. It's more likely to be the Leafs than the Lightning. Lightning's still looking relatively strong out there. Leafs, I don't know what's been going on with the Leafs lately. The chat is already fired up here. Terry in the live chat says Leafs season all but done. Will slip out of the playoffs. Remember, I told you I also had Leafs losing 4-2 tonight. Yeah, it's. I know it's, we're fans, so we're in that sort of headspace of the world is falling apart, the sky is falling, and I try to avoid that. With sports because it's a long season. Things go up and down. There are moments where the team looks amazing, and you think if they could just play the Stanley Cup final right now with us, it would be amazing. And then you have other times like this where it feels like the sky is falling. But this is a moment where, coming out of the deadline, you make a couple of big acquisitions. You think, here it is. This is our chance. This is our shot. We're in a tight race for first in the division. And I would describe the last couple of Leafs games as looking like playoff hockey in the sense that the Leafs played the way they play in the playoffs. No more than 2 goals. Not allowed to score any more than that. It's all Nylander. Everything runs through Nylander. Matthews and Marner start to vanish. Matthews, he got a goal tonight. Kind of a funky one. We'll talk about that for sure. I'm feeling like I'm seeing shades of the last couple of playoff rounds that the Leafs have played, where you think this team has the talent, it has the drive, it could be great, and instead we're just kind of missing every opportunity. But we'll get to that some more in a bit. Let's take a look at things from a Sens perspective. Obviously, big 2 points for you guys, moving up in the standings, or at the very least solidifying your place in the playoff spot. What's the big takeaway from the Sens perspective of this game? What was the moments that you looked at in this one where you go positive or negative about what it says about the Sens season so far?
I wouldn't say it's this game specifically that where I've seen this, but it's definitely helped cemented that this team, this might come back to bite me if they suddenly fall off and miss the playoffs, but this team does feel so different in just that in previous teams, and I don't want to put all of this on DJ Smith by any means, but teams of the past, Sens of the past, they were not good at holding a lead. They get that lead and then they just coast for the third period. I don't know if they just were gassed. Like, I don't know if it was an issue of just like being able to like maintain that level of play for 60 minutes. I don't know if it was the game plan of like, all right, we scored 3 goals. We're not good enough to score anymore. Let's just try and keep the puck out of our net. I don't know what the game plan was with those teams of the past, but this team feels like, they get the win. Well, I think the stat is, I think with these 2 wins against Toronto and Boston, I want to say the Sens are something like 25-1-1 when they lead through 2 periods this season.
That's pretty good.
So being used to watching this team blow a lead pretty consistently, it's a completely different feeling team. So I that's my main takeaway is this team is able to number one, hold lead, and number 2, like bounce back after a rough play. Like you kind of hinted at earlier with that Matthews goal. The Sens of the past would have shut down after that. This team can, number one, fight back and like play through. Like, I think the big difference is this team has a much shorter memory, and are able to kind of bounce back and hold that lead and play well throughout the game, even though the third wasn't great. They can hold a lead though, is the main thing with this team, and I think that's the main difference between them. Maintaining that 5-point pad they have on the first wildcard spot right now, and being out of it by the first week of December in past seasons.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's talk about, I think, one thing that has been a big part of the Sens' success this year, and a big part of any team's success, the Leafs too, goaltending. Linus Ullmark, as we talked about, he had that brain fart. That Matthews goal, nobody should let that goal in. My roommate doesn't watch a lot of hockey, but he was watching with me for that portion of the game, and he goes, "How is this a professional goalie?" And I'm like, "No, he's actually good. That was just a big mistake." And he made the mistake with the, who should be the most dangerous guy on the ice out there, Austin Matthews, taking advantage of it. But otherwise, especially in the third period, a lot of big saves, lot of key, making the saves at key moments for the Sens. What did you think of Ullmark's game tonight?
Yeah, I'd say outside of that, I mean, pretty rough play. Like it's just one of those funny things where, the puck just kind of bounces off his stick in a way he didn't expect. Shabbat read the play. I was like, all right, he's got it. Let me just kind of quickly go out here, try and get myself set up for a pass from Ullmark, and because of that, the way the puck bounces, it just kind of goes away from both Ullmark and Shabbat on that play, and he panics, as I think anyone would in that scenario. But like on the whole, on the season, Ullmark did have a bit of a slow start to the season, but since then he's been unbelievable. Another big difference for the team, not just this team is able to hold a lead. This team is able to hold a lead because we can, as a fan base, for the first time, we're like confident in that person in net. Last season between Forsberg and Korpisalo, they both had an 890. This season and this season, Ullmark has just been unbelievable. And even on some of his weaker games, like that game against Boston, I'm sure you saw that crazy diving save he made. Has been playing everywhere.
Wild.
That came minutes after he gave up a third goal on 8 shots. So just like the rest of the team, he's got such a short memory. He's able to make some incredible saves not long after, giving up some stinkers. He's been so great for the team this season. I can't believe that I have a confidence in the guy in net in Ottawa. It's such a nice change.
Yeah, and he kind of did that tonight too. He makes that goof with the Matthews goal. The Nylander goal, that was just an insane individual effort from William Nylander.
Yeah.
He looked like the kid. Like, when I see Nylander play, it sometimes takes me back to playing House League, when there would be one kid who was on like the select team or played AA or something, but still played House League for some reason. And they would come in and they could just do anything on their own with the puck. And they would skate around and skate around and skate around. And sometimes they'd lose it and sometimes they'd score. Willie sometimes looks like he's just doing that on the NHL ice. So you can't really blame him for that one. Matthews goal, big goof, whatever. But then he makes the save with his mask a few minutes later. later. He has a huge glove save on Morgan Riley. He robs Tavares in the dying moments. He was very solid as the Leafs tried to put a press on in the final minutes of the game, and big part of the win. On the Leafs side of things, Anthony Stolarz got the start tonight. Very much seems like Craig Berube wants to run with Stolarz. It seems like Stolarz is going to be his guy going into the playoffs. Joe Wool looks like he'll settle into the backup role, but not too far back. I think they won't be. I don't think they'll hesitate to go to Joe should things take a turn in the playoffs as they did last year with Samsonov. But Stolarz continues to be solid. I don't think he's quite as lights out as he was to start the year, but he's played solid. I will say one thing that concerned me is that the first two Sens goals were from basically the exact same spot on the ice. Sanderson and Perron, both basically right from the face-off dot, right there, and they were both sort of the same shot, kind of top shelf, and I was looking at it
both looking like Ovi on that one.
Yeah, I was looking at that going, is that our weakness? Is that your weakness there, Anthony? Is that the kryptonite? Is that the shot you're never going to stop? So I do wonder a little bit about that. I hope Leafs goalie coaches maybe spend a little bit of time preparing for those sorts of shots, because you'll need to make the saves. Let me ask you something. Ridley Grigg. Yeah. Is he a factor in every Sens game, or is it just the Leafs games? Because he felt like he was all over this one, including at the end with his 3 misses at the empty net. And we're like, oh, that's why he took the slap shot last year. He seems to be such a big factor in these Leafs Sens games. What's he represent? What's he mean to the Senators as a whole?
He's like, okay, so I think the nicest. I don't want this to come off as like a dig at all, because it's nothing but positivity here. He really at times feels like Brady Tkachuk light. Okay. Like he's like a third line Brady Tkachuk. He's not going to put up the same numbers. If anything, he might be Brady Tkachuk with a bit more defensive ability. But he's got that. I mean, he loves to get into the puck battles and everything. Actually, real quick before I get into this, so the fight.
Yeah.
The fight that happened, do you think that's just like, the deadline acquisition trying to, look, trying to like make a point? Number one, well, obviously, like the Leafs were down by 1 goal.
Yeah.
For the Lawton Greg fight. Now, do you think that's, is Greg just the guy that happened to line up next to him off that faceoff, or is it the knowledge of, hey, Leafs fans hate this guy?
I wonder if there was an element of that, because Scott Lawton has come in. Both Scott Lawton and Brandon Carlo. That's his name, right? I'm having a brain fart here. Both of them came in, and there were high expectations for them. Lawton in particular has been somebody that Leafs fans have kind of expected might be a member of this team before the end of the year, and lo and behold, here he is. And neither of them got off to the greatest start post-deadline with the Leafs. So I think Lawton is trying to prove himself, trying to show his value, show his worth. I think tonight he played a lot better than he has in other games. Still maybe not everything everybody has hoped he would be, but there's, we're still 3-4 games into this. It's no time to write him off just yet. But I do think it's definitely an element of him just wanting to show, like, yes, I am here. I am part of this. You wanted toughness from me. I can bring the toughness in every regard, and not just hits, not just going to net. I'll also fight somebody. And with Greg, there wasn't much talk about the empty netter. There hasn't been, this is the 3rd game.
Right.
It's sort of faded into the memory. It was only when they started bringing it up on the broadcast, like, oh, right, yeah, that did happen last year, and Morgan lost his mind and got suspended for 5 games, rightfully so, and all that stuff. So I don't know if it was still like a let me get you back for this from last year, or if it was who's been a pest tonight, who's been annoying me tonight,
Right.
or whoever has the misfortune of lining up against me. If there's somebody who might throw the gloves down like Ridley Grigg. So that was my read on it. I don't think it was the empty net thing. The only time I kept thinking about the empty net thing was when Ridley Grigg missed the empty net about 3 times at the end of the game. Well, he got one in once, but he was about a foot offside. But it was like, here is the perfect opportunity to flip the narrative on it. You've got the magical ending. He was going to do it again. He was going to seal it, and he missed. And then Marner sacrificed his body to stop it the other time, and it just seemed like here's the opportunity, and they just couldn't turn it around and get it into the net, couldn't get it past Allmark. But I think because of that incident last year, Grigg is kind of a fascinating figure to me, because I think he understands the Battle of Ontario in a way that maybe most guys playing don't, because I don't think prior to that, I don't think there was a ton of animosity between the current Leafs and the current Sens. It's not 2004 with Daniel Alfredsson and Wade Redden and Darcy Tucker and Ty Domi and everything. I don't think there's that.
Yeah.
But the fans, we remember it. We've heard of it. If people are younger, the rivalry, and so I think Sens fans would love a moment like that, and Leafs fans, we would love a moment like that going the other way. So
for sure,
yeah. So I think he gets it. And he was playing to that last year.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Greg is just he's. I mean, I understand why Leafs fans might think it slightly differently, but Greg is absolutely one of those guys who's just he's just so in it every single game. Like he's one of those guys that just doesn't take a shift off ever. And I realize that sounds silly. That's most of the NHL, but he's just one of those guys who's always in it, always trying to get under your skin. He just maybe tends to be a little better at it when playing the Leafs.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that everybody would love to have him on your team. That's what everybody says about Marchand, right? Like everybody'd love to have him on their team, but he pisses you off when you're playing against him. And he really knew how to get under Leafs fan skin last year. Any other big thoughts from this game? Anything else that really stood out to you from the Sens perspective?
A couple things. I think a lot of this defensively for the Sens. If I'm getting very specific, I'm a little nervous about Artem Zub. He had a really, really rough night tonight between a couple of just poor defensive plays and then that late game penalty, the delay of game.
Yeah, in a game where the refs really didn't want to call any penalties. I mean, they called the one on OEL earlier, but there were several other things going both ways that could have been called, and they were skipping it. And he did the one thing they can't not call, which is obviously flip the puck over the glass.
Yeah. The Sens are also worth noting. They're taking fewer too many men penalties than they were earlier on in the season. However, I gotta say those two really poor changes in the second period that resulted in chances for the Leafs. I don't know if that's just I need to pay more attention to this. I don't know if that's a second period issue. I don't know if it's a long change that they're having so much difficulty timing or what. But guys, you gotta be a little bit better on that. No, I don't. I tend to. I don't know how you typically are. I tend to get a little nitpicky on wins. I tend to kind of look at the small mistakes that kind of bug me, just because I'm at the point now where I'm looking at this team and thinking about playoffs, and I'm going, well, would this have been okay in the playoffs? And actually, speaking of which, I just want to also bring off as well, just in the name of the Battle of Ontario, which can we just for a second enjoy the fact that for the first time since 2004, well, maybe not the first time, they both made the playoffs in 17, but it didn't feel like the rivalry was fully back, because I don't think either fan base was all that confident that their team was going to be good. I think we can confidently say the Battle of Ontario is back. They're finally, looks like they're probably both going to be teams that are good for more than one season now. It's a huge deal. Having said that, though, the Leafs are now 8-10 against playoff teams in the East.
Yeah, yeah, and was it now 4 in a row? Sens wins in the Battle of Ontario. They're doing.
I think it's 5
That's
total.
five-
It's definitely a
five now.
season. It's a season sweep now, at least for the
God.
regular season.
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 or 6. Actually, no. Is it Allmark that's won 5 straight against the Leafs now, and the Sens are at 6?
That
I
wouldn't
don't
surprise
remember.
me.
Either
That wouldn't
way.
surprise me either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the one thing the Leafs have on Allmark is the one playoff game he played last year for the Bruins. We won that one. Moral victories, huzzah! But yeah, no, things are definitely trending in the wrong direction for the Leafs right now. Like they have a tendency this year to be very streaky. Like at the start of the new year, basically right up until the Four Nations, they followed a pattern of 3 wins, 3 losses, 3 wins, 3 losses, 3 wins, 3 losses, and it basically took us right up until game 1 of the Four Nations before that stopped. Then coming back from that, there was I think 4 in a row for the Leafs, and then since the trade deadline and leading into the trade deadline, they've kind of fallen off a cliff where their last win in the last week or so, their only win in the last week or so, was the shootout against Utah, which, boy, that's not the most confidence building win. Like, that's one where you're like,
Sure.
okay, good that we got it. You got to win those games. But it's 1, bad that it took you to the shootout, and 2, bad that it was Utah that took you to the shootout. Because, they're still in a bit of a playoff fight, but not quite as, they're not as in it. It's not losing to the Panthers, the Lightning, Vegas, Colorado in a shootout. Honestly, even losing to a game versus Ottawa, where a team that's really in a fight. Like, if this game had gone to overtime, you go, okay, yeah, both teams are really battling it out in this one. Whereas a regulation loss instead, again, just hammers home this feeling of, is the sky falling? What's happening here? Why are we in another losing streak? And look, I'm going to the game on Monday. I'm hoping that that's the beginning of the next winning streak and that we can ride this weird momentum thing into the playoffs. And in the playoffs, sometimes being streaky is good. It's also bad.
Yeah.
It can also be very, very bad.
And weirdly enough, the Sens are in a very similar position with being streaky. Like, the Sens are now on a 7-0-1 run. Before that, they lost 5 straight, and before that, they won 5 straight.
Oh my
so I'm confident. I love this team. I think this team's making the playoffs. I'm just waiting for that next losing streak to start, because it feels like it's inevitable with just how streaky this team has been. So, they're closing the gap right now on the Leafs. It's only 4 points, but if the Leafs do go on that winning streak, as the Sens go on another losing streak of some kind, things are gonna go. Still, there's still plenty of time left in the season for trajectories to change here.
These Canadian NHL teams, they just damage us. We can't enjoy the good times. We're falling apart in the bad. It's emotional damage, I tell you. All right, let's move into our second period here. As we do that one, of course, remind you to make sure you're subscribed to Game Over. You can subscribe to Game Over Toronto. Tune in live after every Leafs game. Subscribe to Game Over Ottawa. Tune in live after every Senators game. It's also game overs for all of the Canadian markets. You can subscribe to all of them. Get some terrific post-game reaction, post-game content for all of them. Tune in live, be part of the live chat, or you can listen to them after the fact. You can watch them after the fact on YouTube, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can subscribe to Game Over Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Winnipeg, Edmonton. I just said Alberta. I mean Calgary, and Vancouver, of course. So tune in and enjoy some great hockey content, and maybe check out Hyperdrive Hockey as well for all things hockey. It's a great podcast. You should tune in as well. All right, we've mentioned the playoffs. We've mentioned the Battle of Ontario. The Battle of Ontario, as far as I'm concerned, was born in those early 2000s years when it seemed like no matter what, the Leafs would play the Senators in the playoffs. Those were formative years for me as a Maple Leafs fan. I remember those series, and look, it was a kid, so I had this feeling on it of, well, Leafs are playing the Senators. They're going to win. I didn't know how the season went. I wasn't, I didn't keep up with it that way, but I had seen it happen enough times that I had one friend at school who was a Senators fan, and that was the chirp was, you can beat us every game all season. We'll play in the playoffs. We'll win. And then Leafs stopped making the playoffs. Sens had some years where they were making the playoffs. They stopped making the playoffs. Leafs started making the playoffs. And as you said earlier, this is the first time in quite some time where not only are both of them in a playoff spot, not only are both of them, the Sens are certainly on the upswing. The Leafs are hoping that they haven't hit some sort of terrible plateau and are still on the upswing. And it's not impossible. It's not impossible that they may meet. I think if it's to happen, it'll likely be in the first round. I suppose it's possible it could happen in a later round, but it seems that we could return to that. How would you feel, Charlie, about a long-awaited 20 years later rematch of the Battle of Ontario this year? This Leafs team, this Sens team facing off in we'll say the first round.
Not putting my health in consideration, I think it would be great. I think I'd have a really tough time sitting through those games. It's been a very long time since I've watched playoff hockey, and I'm not used to it. So going back into it with the series against the Leafs right off the bat, it's been to put into perspective. I know you can just say it's 2017. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm 28 years old, and the Sens have made the playoffs once in my 20s. So that's how I would like to frame it. That's how I think that really helps get the point across. So to come back into the playoffs and for it to be against the Leafs in round one, number one, I think if the Sens were to win that, it would be hysterical. Just because let's face it. I'm sorry, Sens fans. The Leafs have officially ended the round one exit meme. Because it's the Leafs got to the second round, and if there are Sens fans still leaning on that as a chirp, it's stupid. Whatever. If it bugs them, I get it, but it's a dumb chirp. And I think that if the Leafs were to win against the Sens, there would be a whole lot of people who weren't even old enough to watch those 2000s playoff series to be you still can't. Sens still can't beat us. Whatever, man. You're 16 and you're chirping. Whatever, dude. You don't remember the Leafs being bad. It's just one of those things where I feel I think for the sport, I think for because fan bases outside of Ottawa and Toronto would love it. I think just overall as a spectacle, it would be amazing. I just don't think I could handle being online for any of it.
Yeah, it would be truly amazing to watch. It would be great. Like I said, it'd be great spectacle, but it would be very intense, I think, for everybody viewing it. From the Leafs perspective, right? Like I said, we won all of those series back in the day. So there is part of me that goes, okay, let's do it again. Let's just bring that back. But as you alluded to, and as every Leafs fan and every hockey fan in general is well aware, this team has struggled to take the next step. They've made the playoffs every year since 2017. They've been to the second round once. And even last year, after having made it the previous year, they took a bit of a step back and lost to Boston in the first round. So I do understand why people go back to that chirp. It does make sense. It does pain us greatly that continues to happen. And I also and so in that sense, in the historical sense, I'm okay, it'd be great fun, it'd be great spectacle. We did win all of those old ones. Yeah, let's do it. Then I remember the last time the Leafs played a historic rival in the first round of the playoffs when they were the higher seed and the historic rival was the lower seed, and that was 2021. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens. It was great for the sport. It was great for the history buffs and everybody who wishes that we could still have those sorts of games between the Leafs and the Habs. Take us back to 1967, all of that. And the Leafs went up 3-1. We were so confident. I thought for sure we were going to make it through to the next round. And then Carey Price decided that he wanted to go to the Stanley Cup final and that he was never going to allow another goal. And look, Linus Ullmark may not be Carey Price, but he's pretty good. He's pretty good. He might have a game or two.
He's the kind of goalie that can steal a game or two in a series. That's for sure.
Yeah. So he might have that. And so having been through it with Montreal, I don't know if we can do it again. I don't know if we can do it again. If we get this series, if we get the Battle of Ontario, it needs to be a repeat of 2001, 2002, 2004. Like we need 2003. We need to go back to those ones. The Leafs need to win those games. You got to have Matt Sundin, Alex McGillney, Gary Roberts, and Darcy Tucker in attendance for every single one of those games. They need to be there. On the bench, they can replace all of Craig Berube's coaching staff. Like they just need to be around and just bring whatever aura that they had back in the day and project it onto this team. But it would be fun. Rivalries are great for the sport, and I think one thing that this current playoff format that we have, the wild card thing, it does create situations where you have teams play each other over and over in the playoffs. It does allow for some rivalries to form, but it also can make things be a bit predictable. And for the last few years, it's been Leafs fans have looked ahead at that with sort of dread and gone, okay, we're either facing Tampa, Florida, or Boston. There was no real possibility of seeing another team. And, rivalries are good. They're fun. But let's ask LA Kings fans if they'd like to play the Oilers again for the fifth time. Like, sometimes you want to see another team. You want another playoff matchup. I hated the bubble playoff series against Columbus, but at least it wasn't against Boston. It was somebody else. It was different. And so, looking at the possibility of a Leafs Sens playoff match, like it's exciting. It brings back the nostalgia feelings. It makes you feel good about the future of both teams. And it's something different. It's something, it hasn't been, going into that 2023 playoffs, it was a sad, long march all season, knowing that it was just going to be a rematch of Leafs Lightning. We knew it basically from puck drop of game one, and it was just this sad march to the end that, ends with Tavares' goal, so it was nice and it was exciting. But it was known
it's
the
probably
whole way.
Tampa again this season, right? Like fair to say.
That's
fair to say
it's
probably Tampa.
That's what it's looking like, unless you guys can unseat
preference as a Leaf fan. Like, what's your preference right now? Like, would you prefer Tampa, or would you prefer, I guess, depending on how you look at it, like, probably the top wildcard team, I guess, because I don't think the Leafs or anyone's going to catch the Caps at this point.
Nobody's catching the Caps. So I'm kind of torn, right? On the one hand, there is that part of me that says we beat them once, we can beat them again. And the Leafs have kind of had the Lightning's number at times since Tavares scored that goal in Game 6. And you kind of look at it and you go, okay, maybe we can do it again. We've done it before. Let's do it again, and then we'll hopefully do better against Florida in the second round than we did last time. But I am also intrigued by the possibility of just playing a different team. And you would like to, the Senators, like you said, they're a team that's on the upswing. And there are lots of very, very good players on there. I don't think there are the same terrifying players like Nikita Kucherov or Victor Hedman or
for sure
Andrei Vasilevsky, even even
like
without
Jake
Stamkos. Yeah. And even Lightning without Stamkos, they're not quite as terrifying. The Sens aren't quite as terrifying. They may yet be.
Sure.
They may yet be. Brady Tkachuk is going to be that and may already be that. Claude Giroux had a very good game tonight, and he brings that leadership. David Perron, very, very good player. And, maybe the Sens are sort of one or two pieces away from being that level of frightening. But they don't have that scare value. What they do have is the fact that they swept the season series. So that is also something that you don't feel super great going into it. But I think Leafs fans, like I said, we're a little tired of playing the same teams. We're a little tired of Boston. We're a little tired of Tampa. We've only played Florida once, but it feels like we're sort of they kind of fall into that same category. It felt like last year we were going to wind up playing Florida in the first round, and then at the very in the last weekend the Bruins and Panthers switched places in the standings, and it wound up being Boston. So it would be nice. I was gonna say it'd be nice to see somebody outside of the Atlantic. Which isn't true because the Sens would still be in the Atlantic, but it'd be nice to see somebody outside of those three. Is I think where we're
For
at.
sure, yeah. I don't know. I can't decide what I'd prefer. I mean, the idea of the Leafs is terrifying, but I think it's most likely between just I think this team makes the playoffs, but I don't want to say that I think that they're going to move into the top 3 in the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
So I still feel like the most likely outcome is going to be either Florida or Washington. And I don't know who I prefer out of that, because the Sens aren't great against the Panthers. They won the first game of the season because Allmark stole it. But that also, for the sake of just like outside fans watching the Sens for a change, if it's not going to be the Battle of Ontario, the Battle of the Kachucks would be such an incredible watch. But also selfishly, I kind of lean more towards the Caps out of the 3, to be honest with you. Despite the fact that they're the best, all 3 games against the Caps and between the Caps and Sens had to go to overtime.
Okay.
The Sens won once in overtime, but they've also lost in overtime and lost in the shootout. So the fact that all 3 of those games went past regulation, like, I think it's entirely possible the Sens play the Caps and they lose in 5 games and 3 go to OT or something like that. But I don't know. I think
that there would be an interesting parallel with the Leafs there, because the first time this iteration of the Leafs made the playoffs, they played the Caps in the first round, and it was a closer series than it maybe gets remembered for, because there were a couple of overtimes in that series, and a couple of things go slightly the other way. We may never have had the first round curse. We may have avoided that altogether. But that would be an interesting parallel. We will move into our third period here on Game Over, and we'll remind you, if you want to fire off questions or comments in the live chat about tonight's game or about anything else that we've been talking about, Leafs Sens, playoff aspirations, Battle of Ontario memories, if you got those, fire them off in our live chat. We will get to them as we go, and of course we'll save a couple for our overtime segment. Also want to remind you, if you're enjoying what we're doing at Game Over, if you've enjoyed any of the Game Over shows this year, and you want to take your support to the next level, there are a couple of ways you can support Game Over financially. You can go to patreon.com/the Game Over Network and support us there. There's some fun perks that you can get depending on the tier that you sign up for. During the Four Nations, there was some exclusive stuff happening over there, so you don't want to miss it. So patreon.com/the Game Over Network. You can also support us on our LaRouche campaign, which is for companies based out of Quebec. It can unlock some funding from the Quebec government as well. Link is in the description of both the video and the podcast. And if you want to not just support Game Over financially, but also help spread the word about it, you can buy merch. You can go to thegameovernetwork.com, click on store, and check out what we got there. There's designs associated with every one of the shows for every market. There's Toronto stuff, there's Ottawa stuff, all of the markets. You can check it out. Shirts, hoodies, hats, good stuff. Thegameovernetwork.com, click on store and check it out. All right, so this is something we'll do on Game Over when we have these crossover episodes. We will take a few minutes and ask each other questions, kind of find out what the world outside of our bubbles is thinking about our teams. Charlie, I don't know, are you ready with a Leafs question? Or do you want me to start it off?
I have a question. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
I'm not asking this question. Like, some people might hear this question and think this guy's just trying to upset me, but I'm genuinely interested in the answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Brad Treliving's gone. You're the GM. What are you doing with Mitch Marner?
This is the question. This is the ultimate question.
Because, weirdly enough, despite the fact that I live in Ottawa, I don't have very many Leaf fan friends. There's a lot of them. I avoid them. So, I don't hear too many people in my inner circle as far as my friends talking about this. And I understand oh, look, it's the Sens fan on the Leafs show, stirring the pot. But I genuinely I don't know what Leafs fans want? Like, are they mad that he hasn't signed already? Like, I'm sure there's a few Leafs fans out there who are like, get rid of him. Like, he should want to stay. And there are some that are like, the more level-headed ones saying like, no, like, of course he's gonna try and get the bag. The whole like the whole storyline coming out of Toronto the last several years is, at least with the Kyle Dubas stuff, mostly was like, everyone gets paid because he said they would, and no one's being like pressured into taking a discount. So like, what's going on with Mitch Marner, and like, where does he sign if it's not with Toronto?
It's a fascinating situation, and the trade deadline did add another wrinkle to it with them asking him if he would be willing to waive his no trade clause to go to Carolina in some sort of 1-for-1 trade for Mikko Rantanen. It's been an interesting to follow this contract compared to some of the other contracts that have had to be signed, going all the way back to Marner's first contract, honestly, Nylander's first contract, or their first post entry level deals, because Nylander, of course, he sat out for half a year and then came back and kind of had a speed wobble, and since then has kind of been the best. Marner sat out Marner sat out for 1 day. It was a really public, ugly fight over the contract. And it did sour people on him because he was sort of a teddy bear for his first couple of years. He would hug Carlton the Bear after he was named first star and stuff. Like, he was really loved. And then that negotiation happens. The team never gets over the hump. Gets stuck in the first round with the one exception. And Marner has a tendency to disappear in the playoffs, which he didn't do in his like rookie and sophomore years. He was actually a very, very good player in the playoffs. But in the more recent years, he sort of fades into the background. And Nylander is the guy who steps up quite often, which is why it was really devastating to have him out of the Boston series for so much of it last year. And when he showed up, that was when the series kind of turned around. So Marner, he has this sort of interesting rocky relationship. Matthews' contracts always get signed. They always get signed well in advance. There's never really a concern. The question with Matthews is always not if, but just how much and how long. And they eventually get to an agreement. Nylander last year, it stretched out into the season, but he signed mid-year. He was having an amazing season, but it was stuff that people were really wondering and thinking about and questioning throughout the season. This year, the Marner stuff has largely, I think, faded into the background because there is, I think, an understanding for the player, the team, and the fan base that everything is determined by what happens in the playoffs. Everything, it all comes down to, does he perform well in the playoffs? Does he actually live up to his potential in the playoffs? And so there is a little bit of a wait and see mentality because he's been having a great year. He really has been having a great year. And it's kind of surprising that we haven't talked more about his contract situation. But I think the understanding has always been, well, we'll see. If he shows up in the playoffs, if he plays in the playoffs the way he played in the Four Nations with his overtime goal against Sweden, setting up McDavid for the game winner in the final, like all of that stuff, if he does that, or if he can do that sort of equivalent in the playoffs this year, I think he's looking at not necessarily a blank check, but a pretty penny from being offered to him by the Leafs. If the playoffs go poorly, then I think the Leafs are a little tougher negotiators, and he's more inclined to actually test free agency and see what's out there, and see if there's somebody else who can offer him more. And surely there's somebody else who can offer him more. The question just is that somewhere that he wants to go? Because I do think he really wants to win. I think that's important for him. I don't think he's just looking for the biggest paycheck. And so he'll probably take less if he thinks he's going to a winner. And that will be the question is there a winner out there that's willing to offer up the price for him? Maybe Carolina. Maybe they clearly were interested in him before. But where the trade deadline added this wrinkle was that was the first time we were asked to imagine a team without Mitch Marner. We were asked to imagine a world where he wasn't a Leaf. And it sort of, I think, gets everybody a little bit more prepared for the possibility that it's not a given that he's going to come back. and it may not just be because he doesn't want to. The Leafs may look and go, maybe there's something better out there. If the Leafs let him walk and then sign Sam Bennett, say, then you're thinking, oh, things are looking pretty good. You maybe don't feel so bad. If he walks and they do nothing with the cap space, then there's a different conversation. But that seems unlikely. So I would let it play out. I would like to see how things go. I'd like to see where we wind up. I do think the Four Nations was huge for Mitch Marner. I remember watching the first game against Sweden and saying out loud, I need Marner to score the overtime winner so that that he can learn how to do it for the Leafs. And then 2 minutes later, there he does it. So I think that's kind of the answer. It's a long, rambly answer that's maybe not very satisfying, but it is. We just got to wait and see how this goes in the playoffs. Because if he just does what he did for the last few years, where he disappears, especially in the games that matter, then I think you still want him on your team, but you're a little bit more willing to be a hard ass in the negotiations. If he has an amazing
there's
playoffs,
no way they offer more than Matthews, like on a yearly amount, right? They'd have to keep that number under it. Like
I think
he'd have to land somewhere between Tavares and Matthews as far as the cap hit goes. I think probably like, are Leafs fans mad if it's 12?
I think there will always be people who are mad, but I think ultimately 12 is something that I suspect Leafs fans could live with. I feel like that would probably be, and they do have the option to give him the 8th year and stuff, so that the final number is bigger. But maybe he wants to do the shorter contract and try free agency again in a couple of years when the cap is even higher, now that it seems to be going up by larger leaps more regularly than it did for a few years.
How
there.
mad must Kyle Dubas be right now that the cap is finally going up? Or
like,
supposedly going up a lot in the next 4 years. Yeah.
He's like, this was my plan, and it just had to wait until I was gone to happen.
Yeah.
Well, so let me turn things around now on the Sens perspective. Like we've talked about, this is an exciting year for the Senators. You're looking at the playoffs for the first time in a while. What has been the big difference? What has been the big step that this team has taken this year in your mind? What do you think has been the biggest step that the team has taken to go from perennially outside the playoffs, perennially missing the playoffs, to not just being in the playoffs fairly comfortably now, and feeling like this is the way, this is the future for this team?
I think the easy answer is goaltending,
for sure.
And not even just like as an upgrade on last year. I think just the goaltending in Ottawa has, since Craig Anderson, has just been like this revolving door of mediocrity. It's just constantly awful. Like, what year was it? I think it was in 22-23. The Sens had by far the most goalies appear for them in the season. It was something like they had like 7 goalies play for them in a single season. Had guys like Dylan Ferguson play a couple games, and like it's just all over the place, like just a whole bunch of names. So not only has goaltending been consistently bad since 2017, really. I mean, Anderson stuck around for a couple years after that, but it just kind of fell off. Like he was getting close to 40 there. So it's been consistently bad, while also being like, just as far as the names go, just no one was consistently staying around. After Anderson went, that would have been in the 2020, I believe it was during the 2020 draft. It was the trade for Matt Murray, which worked out great for the Sens, obviously. Following Matt Murray, then you've got like Cam Talbot, Eunice Corpusalo. I'm sure there's another name in there that I'm missing. But it's just been a whole lot of goalies that didn't work out in Ottawa. And then you look at Cam Talbot this season playing well somewhere else. You look at, I had a name in my head, Philip Gustafson. Look at him playing in Minnesota. Had a bit of a stinker of a season last year, but he's been overall pretty good with the Wild. And even at the beginning of the season, things were looking really scary when Allmark had an something save percentage, and Korpisalo was like a 903, and we all went, oh no, oh no. But luckily now Allmark is like very much outplaying both Korpisalo and Swayman, so that's feeling a bit better now. The biggest thing is without a doubt goaltending. The Sens have not had a goalie that fans felt comfortable and confident that goalie could steal a game since Craig Anderson, since peak Craig Anderson in the 2010s. God, I would love to see what like the team save percentage has been over the last few seasons. I don't know off the top of my head. All I know is that they had an 890 between Forsberg and Korpisalo last season.
Yeah, just not good enough. Yeah,
just awful. And this season, let's take a quick peek at goaltending. So Allmark has a 911 on the season through 33 games. If that's been updated since the end of tonight, I don't know if it has. I don't know how quick Hockey Reference typically is on that. But Allmark with a 911, and keep in mind that like now, like save percentage is brutal league wide. Like scoring's come up so much. I don't know if it still is. I know earlier, maybe a couple months ago, the average across the league was like 900 even. I don't know if it's moved at all, but it's probably right around there still.
Yeah.
Forsberg 896, not great, but you're 4 points off being like average, and also it's an improvement on last season. And then of course there's Levi Merilainen, who has played 12 games this season, just through injuries to Allmark so far this season, and through 12 games in the NHL, he has a 925, and I think he's without a doubt the backup of the future. I think the next 4 years that Allmark is under contract with the Sens, I think Merilainen is going to be the guy behind him.
Nice.
Forsberg is on the last year of his deal. He's gone. I think next year it's without a doubt an Allmark-Merilainen combo. And who knows, depending on how things go, like it kind of feels off because you're paying Allmark $8 million for the next 4 years. But if Merilainen can keep going like this, I don't think he's going to be a 925 career save percentage. That's insanity. But I think,
it would just take him right to the Hall of Fame if that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. Just easy for him to get in there if he does that. I don't want to call it a 1A, 1B because Merilainen is still so young, and like we just don't know with him because he's still like 20. How old is he? 22. But if maybe you don't have to rely too much on your backup when Allmark's playing really, really well, and if he's hurt or if he's having a tough time, I much prefer looking at someone like Merilainen in net over Forsberg. Forsberg's gone after the season. There's no way to keep him.
And
Merilainen and Allmark would be incredible.
Yeah, and Allmark thrived under a tandem system in Boston too. Everybody loved the Allmark Swayman thing. So, you want a strong backup in there who can, help out your starter and make sure that they don't, overextend themselves in the season. But you could even move into kind of a new version of the Allmark Swayman thing, and that's. More and more teams are moving in that direction. Even the Leafs with Stolarz and Joe Woll, like they've very much been splitting the net this year. Now it looks like they're going to let Stolarz run with it, but I don't think they'd show much hesitation to go back to Woll if need be, and that just seems to be the way of the future.
I don't love the tandem idea. Like you'd like for your $8 million goalie to play 60 games,
sure, yeah,
but. It's nice to have confidence in that young backup. Like, does Merilainen have the potential to be a starter in the league later on in his career? Absolutely, I think so. I've been so high on this guy since early on, and maybe that's just I say this all the time. That might just be cope because it was the Dylan DeMello trade for the 3rd round pick that turned into Merilainen. But like through his career, he's been really, really impressive. If I can just find, can I see his non-NHL stats really quick? Yes, I can. Because like I don't remember the exact number. That's why I want to pull this up and see. But yeah, he was drafted 3rd round in 2020. So when he was playing in the top Finnish league in 22-23, he would have been 20 years old, and he put up a 917.
Wow, that's impressive.
Which is really something. And in the AHL, 933, had a 926 in the ECHL, 906 last year in the AHL, not as good, but this year 925 in the NHL, 912 in the AHL. And he's still only 22.
That's a top
And
prospect for you there. That's real exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, like, with the timing of it all, with Allmark being, not the youngest guy in
Sure.
net anymore, signed for the next 4 seasons, like, I think it could be perfect timing. Merilainen gets consistent, call it 2-3 years being a backup, then maybe it's a tandem on that last year, maybe even the last 2 years there. Like, I think the Sens, which is incredible to say since it's been so tough since Anderson left, I think the Sens are set up for not only having, success in net this season, but like not just through Allmark's time. Like, I'm putting a lot of faith in Merilainen, and he's still so young, and goalies, I mean, like, who knows?
Yeah. Goalies are their own special witchcraft. It's
yeah, exactly. There's like 10 guys in the league that I'm like confident are going to be over 900 year after year after year, right? Like, it flip flops so much. So I'm putting a lot of faith in Merilainen, but like, it feels like, you know what? If things go well, that's like a decade of solid goaltending for the Sens between Allmark and him. So ideally, the biggest difference for the Sens, being a playoff team this year, is goaltending, and that's going to continue for quite a while.
Amazing. Yeah, that it just shows you how important that position is, that it really makes or breaks your team. And I because I have to make everything about the Leafs real quick, I'll just say I wonder how much of the Leafs' success this year is due to the goaltending, and if there's an element of this latest little portion of the season that's because, not that the goaltending's been bad, it's just come back down to earth a little bit lately, and that's led to some more losses because Anthony Stolarz and Joe Woll were covering things up for a while. We will quickly move into our overtime here. This is our last call for questions, comments in the live chat about anything that we've discussed tonight about the game or anything beyond Leafs and Sens related. Fire them off in the chat. We'll get to them. Charlie, it's been an absolute blast chatting with you. If people want to tune into Game Over Ottawa, give them a reminder of how to do that. And if they want to keep up with you outside of the show, what's the best way they can do that?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Come on over to the Game Over Ottawa channel. We won't be there right away. The Sens' next game is in Montreal, so I'll be on the Montreal channel on Tuesday, but we will be right back on Game Over Ottawa for March 20th. That's on Thursday against Colorado. So keep an eye out for that. We haven't decided who's hosting that one yet. I guess we're just fighting over who wants to watch a blowout.
For the Sens, right? For the Sens.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. But yeah, no, for me specifically, you can find me on Bluesky, at Arsenault on Bluesky. That's just Charlie Arsenault put together. And I still have my Twitter account, at CW Arsenault. I don't do a whole lot of posting over there anymore, but it still exists.
It's there if you ever need it again. Yeah, absolutely. Make sure everybody tune into Game Over Ottawa, and make sure you're following Charlie. As always, you can follow me at Dominic J25 on Instagram mainly. I've been posting a lot from Toronto Comic Con this weekend. So if you like your nerd stuff, you should check that out. And if you want to get real nerdy, you should tune into the Star Wars Underworld podcast, which is my other show where we go deep on the Star Wars universe. So just search for that in your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube. And of course, make sure you subscribe to Game Over Toronto. And we'll be back on Monday. Zach will be hosting that one. It's Leafs Flames showdown, and Zach will be hosting that crossover with Game Over Calgary. I will be at Scotiabank Arena, hoping that it's the beginning of the next winning streak. All right, we'll go to the chat here. I got a couple of comments from Terry, who feels very strongly about how this game reflects on the Leafs, saying, let's be honest here, the Leafs aren't done and will slide out of the playoffs. That would be a true collapse. I think Leafs fans all remember Brian Burke's infamous line about the 18-wheeler falling off the cliff. This would be like 18-wheeler falling off the cliff and like falling down into the Grand Canyon, smashing through the Earth's crust, and then coming out the other side if the Leafs fell out of the playoffs. It's theoretically possible. Anything is possible. They haven't clinched yet. It is theoretically possible, but it seems very unlikely. As we said, this team's been so streaky this year. It just seems like we're about to hit another streak going the other way, and all these points that were lost, you can't really make up for them, but a whole bunch of new ones will be gained. And we'll go into April still panicking, still feeling uneasy because the Leafs never do anything in the first round, except that one year. But we'll still have that feeling. But I don't think this stretch necessarily represents who this team is. It represents problems and things that need to be addressed, but I don't think it's definitively this is the Leafs team, is how bad they've been here. Lauren Williamson, our Game Over Toronto co-host, also in the chat, says Leafs lose a game that was very winnable, but again they vanish for huge stretches of time. Yeah.
Can I disagree, Lauren? I'm sorry. Lauren, long time network coworker of mine, one of the I guess in the second round of Game Over Toronto hosts being brought on. Mm-hmm. I've known Lauren for a while. I feel comfortable saying that I don't think the Leafs lost a game that was very winnable. I think the Leafs scored one goal that wasn't handed to them in a game that they were outmatched for the vast majority of, is what I will say. Yeah,
I think it was winnable in the sense that it wasn't 7-2. Sure. It was. They could have come back. Allmark did make some absolutely killer saves. Like there is a version of this game where the Leafs win and we go, wow, I can't believe they won that, which they have done several times this year. So it was winnable in that regard. But I will say the Sens were definitely the better team. They outplayed them through the majority of the game, and the results speak for themselves. 4-2.
I will say, though, despite the fact that the season series has gone the way it has with what scores of 2-1 and 3-0 leading up to this game, I believe.
Something like that, yeah.
So despite the fact that the Sens have kept the Leafs to one goal in those first two games combined, I was watching the game with my girlfriend and I said, okay, well, this was after the Sens took the lead and made it 3-2. I said to her, you don't hold, like, you're not going to hold the Leafs to only 2 goals, or one of the goals was handed to them. They're going to score at least 2 goals on their own. Yeah. And I was I was serious about that. Like, I thought for sure the Sens would have to score a 4th to win the game. Mm-hmm. Obviously asterisk being like not an empty net goal. I thought the Leafs were going to tie it up for sure. So like, I will say, despite, the way the game went, the Leafs are still absolutely a threat in like every sense in games like this. So I wouldn't buy into the whole, oh my God, the Leafs are gonna fall out of the playoffs, because that's the thing too. Like, I'm not gonna try and like pile on Terry specifically. I just find this to be a thing with hockey fans in general. Like, their memory only goes far back as the last 3 games. Yeah. Like, your favorite hockey team has made the playoffs every year since 2017, and like the results haven't been great, but like you're in the playoffs every single year. But the world is ending and everything sucks, and I hate sports because my team might not win the division. Like, and I know, and this is coming from a Sens fan who like is just like, I know how this sounds. Like, yeah, of course you think this way because your team hasn't made the playoffs since 2017, you absolute bum. But like, chill, guys. Like,
yeah, everybody chill.
Tied for second in the division in what is arguably like maybe not so much. I think going into the season, everyone looked at the Atlantic as like the scariest division to be in. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it still is, just because of how the Central is. Mm-hmm. But like, it's a tough friggin' division, and you're tied for second. You're fine.
Who was it? Was it Brizgalov? Who was it that said, "Why you have to be mad?" in an interview?
It's only game.
Yeah. Sometimes
why you have to be mad?
Yeah. Sometimes I think
we have to. About, it was like, because they were asking like, "Hey, Oilers fans are pissed because Chris Pronger wanted to get traded, and then, man, Brizgalov on the Ducks. That's an era.
What a time.
Yeah." It's only game.
Yeah.
He's minus 32. Can you imagine? Yeah.
Sometimes I think we could all stand to remember that a little bit. Just when we're feeling really mad, remember why you have to be mad. It's only game.
it's only game. There's no I don't know how dystopian this sounds, but there's no world where you should be more stressed about your favorite hockey team than like your job or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
yeah.
let's take a step back and look at the big picture here, guys. It's Saturday. You watched hockey. Be happy.
It was a
you
good
gotta
time.
go to work on Monday. Like, just enjoy yourself. It's Saturday night.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, I think we will end this episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Charlie, thank you for joining us from Game Over Ottawa to break down this game. That was a lot of fun. Everybody, make sure you go listen to Game Over Ottawa. Go watch Game Over Ottawa after every Sens game, and stick around here to watch and listen to Game Over Toronto after every Leafs games. But it's been a blast, and we'll see everybody next time.